for those people who say Congress has no right to complain about this now, they have known about all of this, Sarah Wyden had this to say, clip number 5.
Now, defenders of this deception have said that members of Congress have the ability to get the full story of what the government is doing on a classified basis, so they shouldn't complain when officials make misleading statements, even in a congressional hearing. This is an absurd argument. Sure, members of Congress could get the full story in a classified setting, but that doesn't excuse the practice of half-truths and misleading statements being made on the public record. When did it become all right in America for government officials' public statements and private statements to differ so fundamentally? The answer is it's not all right, and it's indicative of a much larger culture of misinformation that goes beyond the congressional hearing room and into the public conversation writ large.
And another way of saying that is that they're lying. And here he explains the process he undertook to force James Clapper to tell the truth about the NSA's surveillance capacities, the steps he took to basically give Clapper the opportunity to tell the truth, and how Clapper refused to take those opportunities. Here's number 6.
A few months ago, I made the judgment that I would not be responsibly carrying out my oversight powers if I didn't press intelligence officials to clarify what the NSA director said repeatedly about data collection. So I decided it was necessary to put the question to the Director of National Intelligence. So I had my staff send the actual question over a day in advance so that the director would be prepared to answer. The director, unfortunately, said the answer was no. The NSA does not knowingly collect data on millions of Americans, which is obviously not correct. After the hearing, I had my staff call the director's office on a secure line and urge them to correct the record. But disappointingly, his office decided to let this inaccurate statement stand. My office made it clear, my staff said clearly that this was wrong and that it was unacceptable to leave the American people misled, and I continued to warn the public about the problem of secret surveillance law over the following weeks, in effect until the June disclosures.
And those June disclosures he's talking about, of course, came from Edward Snowden via the Washington Post and the Guardian. Now, then Sarah Wyden goes on to talk about the argument that these programs, and we're, in this instance, he's talking about essentially the 2 major programs that have been revealed. One is PRISM. This deals with hoovering up all of our online information. The other is the mass surveillance, the hoovering up of the metadata and the content of phone calls and simply banking them. He says that PRISM has had been somewhat effective. He still calls for more privacy protections regarding PRISM. But he points out that the NSA has been combining, when they refer to these 2 programs together, as a way of hiding the fact that the phone surveillance, as far as he has seen and as far as he is aware of, has provided nothing of intelligence value. Here's that, number 7.
Now, even after those disclosures, there's been an effort by officials to exaggerate the effectiveness of the bulk phone records collection program. One way they do that is to conflate it with the collection of internet communications under Section 702 of the FISA statute. This collection, which involves the PRISM computer program, has produced some information of real value. I will note that last summer I was able to get the executive branch to declassify the fact that the FISA court had actually ruled that on at least one occasion that this collection violated the Fourth Amendment in a way that affected an undisclosed number of Americans. And the court also said that the government had violated the spirit of the law as well. So I certainly think Section 702 needs stronger protections for the privacy of law-abiding Americans, and I think those protections could be added without losing the value of the statute and the collection. Meanwhile, I haven't seen any indication that the bulk phone records program yielded any unique intelligence that was not also available to the government through less intrusive means. When government officials refer to these programs collectively, and we have seen that on a number of occasions, and say that, quote, these programs provide unique intelligence without pointing out that one program is doing all the work and the other one is basically along for the ride, in my judgment, that is also a misleading statement. And there have been a number of misleading and inaccurate statements made about Section 702, the prison program and its collection as well. Last month, Senator Udall and I wrote to the NSA director to point out that the NSA's official fact sheet contained some misleading information and a significant inaccuracy that made protections for the privacy of our people sound much stronger than they actually are. The next day, the fact sheet was taken down from the front page of the NSA website. Would the misleading fact sheet still be up there if Senator Udall and I hadn't pushed to take it down?
Undoubtedly, it would have been still up there. And then the other question is would they have taken that action were it not for the revelations that we have seen from these unauthorized leaks from Edward Snowden? Senator Wyden goes on to talk about some victories they have had in creating more transparency and in shooting down some of the administration's attempts to punish whistleblowers. And he speaks of a growing concern in the Senate and the House as to these issues, which I think is we are seeing actually play out today with this Amish-Conyers amendment. Also, and maybe not coincidentally, Thomas Keane and Lee Hamilton, those who sat on the top of the 9/11 Commission, wrote a op-ed today. I believe it was in the in Politico.
Yes.
They wrote, in part, the NSA's metadata program was put into place with virtually no public debate, a worrisome precedent made worse by erecting unnecessary barriers to public understanding via denials and misleading statements from senior administration officials. When the Congress and the courts work in secret, when massive amounts of data are collected from Americans and enterprises, when government's power of intrusion into the lives of ordinary citizens, augmented by the awesome power of advanced technologies, is hugely expanded without public debate or discussion over 7 years, then our sense of constitutional process and accountability is deeply offended. Officials insist that the right balance has been struck between security and privacy, but how would we know when all the decisions have been made in secret with almost no oversight?